A girl runs towards the ocean. She's laughing. She's free. And then she isn't. You don't see anything, but you hear John Williams' two notes. And somehow, in 30 seconds, Steven Spielberg has made you afraid of the ocean for the rest of your life. This is the story of how that happened. Welcome back to Cinemastalgia, the show dedicated to the films that shaped us, moved us, and stayed with us long after the credits rolled. Let's relive the movies that made us. Tonight, Jaws. And if you grew up watching this movie, you know exactly what I mean when I say it didn't just scare you. It rewired something. It changed how you look at water. Dark water, murky water, water you can't see the bottom of. You're at a pool, perfectly safe, and your brain whispers, what if? 50 years later, that's still happening. That's not just a scary movie. That's a movie that changed you. What's remarkable about Jaws is that it shouldn't have worked. The mechanical shark barely functioned. The shoot went so far over budget and schedule that Universal executives were quietly prepared for a disaster. Spielberg was 26 years old, unproven in features, directing a film with a malfunctioning prop in the middle of the ocean. Everything that could go wrong did. And the result was the first summer blockbuster in cinema history. The film that changed how Hollywood releases movies. A thriller with a broken shark that made more money than anyone had ever seen, launched one of the most important careers in the history of the medium, and left generations of people slightly afraid of the beach. Jaws is 50 years old, and it never once has stopped working. Let's talk about why. Chief Martin Brody is new in town. He took the job on Amity Island because he needed a change, a smaller life, a slower life. He's got a wife, 2 kids, and a house near the water. What he doesn't have is any particular love of the ocean. Brody is afraid of water. The movie tells you that quietly, and then uses it against you for the next 2 hours. Amity Island in early summer feels real in a way a lot of movie settings don't. The clapboard houses, the tortoise shops, the sun-bleached docks. Screenwriters Peter Benchley, Carl Gottlieb, and Spielberg himself built a place that felt lived in. A community whose entire economic identity depended on the summer season. That detail matters enormously. It's not just a backdrop, it's a pressure point. The shark doesn't just threaten lives, it threatens livelihoods. And the town's reluctance to close the beaches is completely believable because of it. Mayor Vaughn in his ridiculous anchor print blazer isn't a villain in the traditional sense. He's a guy who needs the summer to work. He's wrong, catastrophically wrong, but you understand his logic. That's good writing, and Jaws is full of it. The film opens in summer, among young people, with music and fire and a feeling that nothing bad could happen. And then something very bad happens. That contrast, the warmth of community, the warmth of the season, against the cold shock of what happens next is the engine the whole movie runs on. The mechanical shark's name was Bruce. It was named after Steven Spielberg's lawyer. It leaked. It corroded. It stopped working in salt water almost immediately. And for long stretches of the production, the filmmakers simply could not use it. What happened next was accidental genius. Spielberg and his team decided to imply the shark rather than show it. Long sequences with no creature at all. Just a yellow barrel skidding across the surface of the water. Just a dog that doesn't come back. Just a boy on a raft and a dark shape beneath him. Your imagination does the work. And your imagination, as it turns out, is a much better monster maker than any mechanical prop. John Williams' score is inseparable from this effect. Those 2 notes function almost like a heartbeat, like something biological. Williams reportedly played the motif for Spielberg, who laughed and assumed it was a joke. It's the most famous 2-note theme in cinema history, and it works because it never quite resolves. It just builds. It just gets closer. The first real look at the shark, fully visible, breaching beside Quint's boat, is when Roy Scheider delivers the line, "You're going to need a bigger boat." It was improvised. Scheider reportedly said it quietly, almost to himself, and Spielberg left it in. The crew's reaction, laughter, is audible on set, and some of that made it into the film. That accidental truth, a man seeing something impossible and reaching for something ordinary to say, is more frightening than any jump scare. 3 men go out on a boat, a cop who's afraid of water, a rich kid oceanographer with too many gadgets and too much confidence, and a shark hunter who who survived the USS Indianapolis and never really came back from it. The dynamic between Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw is the beating heart of Jaws. Scheider plays Brody as a fundamentally ordinary man, not a hero in the traditional sense, just a person trying to do the right thing in a situation that keeps getting worse. Dreyfuss's Hooper is all energy and enthusiasm and scientific certainty, the kind of guy who can't help being right, even when being right makes enemies. Shaw's Quint is something else entirely. There's a scene that takes place in the belly of the orca, at night. The three men are sharing scars and drinks and stories. Quint starts talking about the Indianapolis. The USS Indianapolis was real, a naval cruiser sunk by a Japanese submarine in 1945. The survivors spent days in shark-infested water before rescue. Quint was there, or rather a man like Quint was there. The monologue, largely written by John Milius and polished by Shaw himself, is one of the great pieces of film acting of the 1970s. It's quiet, it's precise, and it makes the shark personal in a way that nothing else in the movie does. Shaw reportedly delivered it better after a few drinks. Whether that's true or legend, the performance is extraordinary either way. The original shoot was supposed to last 55 days. It lasted 159. Principal photography was planned to begin in May of 1974 and wrap by late summer. It was still going by October. Martha's Vineyard was chosen as a shooting location because its shallow water extended far enough offshore to provide a realistic open ocean look. The problem was the ocean. Seas were rough, equipment corroded, schedules collapsed, actors were late, scenes had to be reshot. The mechanical sharks, there were 3 of them, functioned so poorly that entire sequences had to be reconceived on the fly. Spielberg later said he considered removing his name from the film. The head of Universal, Sid Sheinberg, was watching the budget spiral and reportedly told Spielberg in no uncertain terms that his career in features would be over after this film failed. That's a specific kind of pressure. A 26-year-old trying to make his first major studio film, surrounded by a production in chaos, with executives threatening his future. What Spielberg did under that pressure was transform a liability into a technique. The broken shark forced restraint. That restraint created suspense, and that suspense created a masterpiece. The film came in at $9 million, roughly double the original budget. It made over $400 million worldwide in its initial release. Hollywood had not previously concentrated a major film's release on thousands of screens simultaneously with national television advertising. Jaws pioneered that model. The blockbuster summer season, as an institution, as the backbone of studio economics, all begins with Jaws. Here's the thing about Jaws. It's not really about a shark. The shark is real, obviously. It eats people. That is a plot fact. Jaws works on deeper registers than creature feature horror. And the reason it endures while so many other animal attack movies don't is that it's built around anxieties that have nothing to do with the ocean. Brody is afraid of something he doesn't fully understand. He's an outsider in a community that doesn't entirely accept him, making decisions that put him in conflict with the people who have power over him. He knows what's right and keeps being prevented from doing it by institutional cowardice and economic pressure. Mayor Vaughn, with his need to protect the tourist economy, is every bureaucratic force that prioritizes optics over safety. Quint, with his obsession, is the danger of letting fear curdle into something violent and self-destructive. The film hit theaters in 1975, a year after Watergate and during the tail end of Vietnam. Trust in institutions was low. The sense that official voices would lie to protect themselves, would keep the beaches open when a shark was actively attacking people, mapped onto something raw and contemporary. Peter Benchley's source novel was more thriller than allegory, but Spielberg's film elevated that material. The shark became almost mythological, unstoppable, enormous, without motive. It doesn't want anything. It just exists, and it keeps coming. There's something philosophically terrifying about that. Most of the time, the horror can't be seen, but it's always there waiting beneath the surface. Spielberg built his entire visual language around controlling what you know versus what you don't. Jaws is a masterclass in that technique, and it all comes to a head in the Amity Beach sequence after the beaches have been reopened. Brody knows the shark might be coming, but the audience is ahead of almost every character in almost every scene, and Spielberg weaponizes that gap. He cuts to Brody scanning the water, back to the beach, to children splashing, to the water, to Brody. The anxiety escalates through editing, not through anything actually visible. Brody thinks he sees something. He panics. It turns out to be a pair of teenage boys with a rubber fin. The release of tension is so overwhelming the audience starts laughing. Then immediately, from the left, off camera, the real attack begins. The contrast between false alarm and real horror, separated by maybe 30 seconds, is one of the most precise pieces of audience manipulation in cinema. Spielberg understood that relief is just compressed fear, and that a laugh before a scream makes the scream even worse. The famous dolly zoom on Brody's face as the shark's victim is pulled under, the camera moving while the lens pulls out, the background expanding, was borrowed from Hitchcock's Vertigo. Spielberg has always worn his influences openly, but this shot transcends reference. It captures, visually, the feeling of your world suddenly narrowing to a single, terrible point. If you've ever gotten genuinely bad news, you recognize that feeling immediately. Roy Scheider is on the mast of a sinking boat. The Orca is going down. Quint is gone. Hooper is somewhere under the water in a cage that didn't hold. Brody, the man who is afraid of water, is running out of boat. He jams a scuba tank into the shark's mouth. He climbs the mast. The shark keeps coming. And then, one shot, the shark explodes. And for the first time in the movie, Brody can breathe. The ending of Jaws is almost absurdly simple. And it works because everything before it has earned it. Brody's arc, a frightened outsider who keeps choosing to act despite the fear, despite the pressure, despite the institutional forces arrayed against him, completes in a moment of pure defiance. He doesn't have special skills. He doesn't have Quint's experience or Hooper's knowledge. He has a gun, a scuba tank, and a decision not to stop. John Williams' score, which has been building and receding and building for 2 hours, finally resolves. The ocean, for one moment, is quiet. The last image of Brody and Hooper kicking toward shore together. They're okay. The sun is out. The summer isn't ruined. It's over, and they're alive. It's an ending about ordinary survival, about getting through something enormous and returning to something small. Scheider plays it with relief so exhausted that it almost reads as grief. A lot of blockbusters end with triumph, but Jaws ends with relief. That distinction matters more than it might seem. The ending isn't just a victory, it's a return to normalcy. Jaws is more than 50 years old. It's been watched on screens of every size, drive-ins, living rooms, phones on an airplane, and it never once has stopped working. The two-note theme still makes your heartbeat change. The Indianapolis speech still goes on quiet in the room. The dolly zoom makes your stomach drop. That kind of durability is rare enough to be worth naming. What Spielberg made, in chaos, over budget, with a broken shark in a studio breathing down his neck, was a movie about fear that understood fear from the inside. Not the clean narrative fear of genre films, but the actual texture of it. The way you laugh right before it gets you. The way your mind fills what your eyes can't see. The way a two-note progression can make an entire ocean feel hostile. Every summer, somewhere, someone watches Jaws for the first time and gets out of the water. That's the movie's strange, lasting gift. It didn't just entertain you. It installed something, a small piece of itself, in the part of your brain that calculates danger. More than 50 years later, that's still running. Because even when you can't see the danger's still out there.